Hey, well, good morning, everybody. It's Dave coming to you from the office here in the Wyoming house. It's about 10 a.m. Sunday morning, and I'm going to try something incredibly stupid today. I'm going to try to explain Bitcoin in plain English. It's the basis for the whole crypto world, which means it's the basis for what I do in my crypto investing. And I sense there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, or just a lack of education on what is this thing we call Bitcoin. And I spent several hours kind of watching Bitcoin for Dummies and all this, and what's out there on the internet, at least what I was able to locate. I mean, can't tell you I watched every video, but a lot of it explains like why was it created and why you should own it and the benefits. And I don't want to do any of that. I want to explain like what is this thing and why is it safe, and maybe talk about some of that. But I just want to explain what is Bitcoin to the average person in plain English. So that's the whole topic of this video. There's really gonna be no tobacco, no pipes, no CEO school. This is just an investing school item of one, and that is, what is Bitcoin in plain English? If you don't have any interest in Bitcoin or learning kind of what it is in English, please get off the video, because it's probably going to be a longer one, and I don't want to waste your time. The sole subject of this video is what is Bitcoin in plain English, at least Dave's attempt to do this. Now, this is a really stupid thing to take such a kind of earth-shattering new world concept and try to speak in English, man. I have no authority or reason or education to do this. It's just what I've learned about it over the last, almost 10 years. I'll be smoking some Boswell's Premium Burley while I'm attempting this little mess of mine. So there's your tobacco content. If you're still here, it's because you listen to my warning and you want to keep listening, right? So don't bust my chops that it was too long or didn't have any tobacco content. I'm not wasting anybody's time, because I told you in the first minute or two what we're doing. So we're going to head into the Bitcoin stuff now. So I think the first question to answer is, what is a Bitcoin? Now, it's a little bit like asking, what is a debit card? What is a dollar bill? There aren't really intrinsic, like there's not a definition that you go out there and say, well, this is what a dollar or $20 bill, right? This is what a dollar is. That doesn't really exist. What is a debit card? What is this thing? There's really not a definition for this. So at the most basic levels of our economy, we have things that don't have a specific definition. Bitcoin is kind of like that. But a Bitcoin is an entry in a ledger. I mean, just like the old-fashioned accounting ledgers, a spreadsheet, a to-do list, a grocery list, it's a list. It's an entry in a long list of Bitcoins. And it's got a number, and there's a lot of them. And we'll talk about that in a minute. A Bitcoin is a entry in a long list of all the Bitcoins that exist in the world. That's really it. Oh my God, right? How many are them? How are they stored? How's that list maintained? All that. We're going to go into that. But a Bitcoin is an entry in a long list. Think of a spreadsheet or a grocery list or an old accounting ledger. That's all it is. It's nothing else. There's nothing backing it. It's not based on gold. It's not based on silver. It's not based on a government. Its value is not based on any single thing. There's nothing supporting the value of a Bitcoin. Just so you know, it's no different than this. There is nothing backing the value of this that isn't backing the value of Bitcoin in today's world. I know that's insane. I know you don't want to believe me. There is nothing backing this, right? We pulled off the gold standard in 1970 or 71. There is nothing backing this dollar that is tangible anymore. We don't even make our banks have any reserve anymore. So if they have $1 million in their bank, they used to have a 50%, then 20%, then 10% of that had to be held in reserve. Today, we run on 0% reserve banking. No reserve banking. The bank has to keep none of its money that it has been deposited in. It can loan out all of it. There are no reserves in our banks today. There is nothing backing this. That's crazy. So when I say there's nothing backing a Bitcoin, it's no different than this. And I know it's hard to accept, but just because we don't believe it doesn't make it not true. Nothing's backing this except one thing, and we'll go over that in a minute. I believe many people stop trying to learn about cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin because as soon as you dive into that world, you just hit this blizzard of jargon and crap that in terms that just nobody talks about in real life. You hear about blockchain, you hear digital currency, you hear public key, you hear private key, you hear halving cycle, you hear Bitcoin cycle, you hear about altcoins, you hear about altcoin season. I mean, it's just, it's wrapped, the subject is just wrapped in this, almost like bubble wrap of jargon. And I think some of that is to keep people, the average citizen, from understanding it. And therefore, it should be attractive to the average citizen. If the powers that be, the elites, the financial system, the financial infrastructure of the world has a subject wrapped in such a way that the average person almost can't penetrate it, that should tell you something. That should tell you that they want part of it and they're really not too interested in the average individual getting it. So today we're going to try to open that up and bust some of this jargon up. And that's why I started with the definition of Bitcoin as just being one entry in a long ledger list of all the Bitcoins. So guess what the definition of a blockchain is? The blockchain is that list of Bitcoins. Why don't we just call it that? Right? We love these terms. But blockchain is the list of Bitcoins. That's it. I know people who are way into digital currencies and way into Bitcoin and way into the technology of blockchain are going to bust me in the head here. But I'm telling you, the blockchain is the list of Bitcoins. That's it. And that's what I hate about this world, is that we take such simple concepts and we make them so hard. And that kind of translation from opaque to really easy to understand exists for every one of these terms. I don't want to go over them. I'm certainly answering your questions, but there's no reason. This should not be an entire video on vocabulary translation because I'm trying to get a concept out to you. So where did Bitcoin come from? I mean, how did it start? It started with a white paper that was written in October of 2008. Then the person's name on the white paper, the author of the white paper, was Satoshi Nakamoto. No one's ever met him. No one knows who he is. There's no physical proof of his existence. And there's all sorts of rumors about what Satoshi was or who Satoshi was. And one of them is that it's the CIA. That the CIA created Bitcoin to lure everybody into it so they could track people trying to get outside the US monetary system. I don't know if that's true or not. I have no way of knowing that. I'm just telling you, being honest with you, that it could be the US Intelligence community that has created this entire world and is monitoring it and can pull a rug out from it or use it for nefarious purposes and tracking. That's a possibility. I just can't tell you. But that's just one example of the many theories out there about the basis or the startup of Bitcoin. But it started in October of 2008. That's a fact. It started with this white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto. That's a fact. And it really has taken off from there. So those are the facts. And you can swirl forever if you want to around those facts. I'm moving on from them. You can Google it. I mean, it's a one Google and you're going to get to it. You could Google Bitcoin white paper or Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, and it pops up. You download it and you can read it. You can print it and read it yourself. It's not that long. It's like 10 pages. I mean, it's pretty dry reading, I'll give you that. But, I've done it. I've read it. I have it stored on my computer. It's pretty dry reading. But you can go get the white paper. There's nothing stopping you from having it, keeping it, storing it, reading it, understanding it. So I consider that a positive. It's not a mythical thing. It's out there and you can go get it right now. So I think the next question is, how many Bitcoin exist in the world? And the answer is 21 million. The code, the computer code, and we can talk about that more later, but the computer code is written hard-coded, unchangeable unless something impossible were to happen. There are 21 million Bitcoin in the world. 19.9 of the 21 million have been allocated. There's a name next to 19.9 of 21 million. That leaves what? 1.1? I think 1.1 million entries in the blockchain, entries in that accounting journal. 1.1 million lines have not been allocated. There's no name next to it. How does a name get allocated to a blank Bitcoin? It's through mining, right? That's another phrase that you hear out there. Mining is on the computer. It's solving very difficult equations. And then the consortium that runs Bitcoin, which are the miners, allocate who will get allocated the following Bitcoin. The rate of which Bitcoins are allocated, the blank ones, is getting slower and slower and slower. And in fact, the last Bitcoin, the last entry in the ledger, will not be filled until the year 2140. That's how slow Bitcoin now is being allocated. That wasn't true from 2008 through today. It's been decreasing over, 17 years? Every 4 years, the rate of allocation got cut in half. Therefore, the halving season, the cycle of Bitcoin. We talk about this 4-year cycle of Bitcoin. And that is because every 4 years, the rate of allocating the blank line items in the accounting ledger gets slower and slower. In fact, it gets cut in half every 4 years. Trying to stay away from the jargon. I hope this makes sense. But in this giant ledger with 21 million line items, 19.9 have a name next to them. 1.1 million will get a name allocated to it over the next, 100 years, until the year 2140. And then the entire ledger, the entire blockchain will be allocated and available to the world at large. So I think the next question is, how does the value of Bitcoin established? How's it worth anything if it's just this? Hell, you could go create a spreadsheet or an accounting ledger and put 21 million entries in it and say, hey, I started Batcoin. And so why is that any different than this Satoshi dude who created Bitcoin? That's a really good question. And it goes back to, how does this have any value associated with it? This has value because of 2 reasons. One, it has the full faith and credit backing of the United States government, which I don't know how much that's worth anymore, with coming from a country with, rapidly approaching 40 trillion in debt. But one of the most powerful, largest, most capable governments in the world gives its full faith and credit backing to that dollar. But the bigger one is that you believe in the dollar and I believe in the dollar, and we use it to buy things and we believe in its value. And that is where real value of assets comes, is from the larger public's belief in the asset. Gold is worth what it is because the world believes that's its value. Same with silver, same with real estate, same with the dollar bill, and the same with Bitcoin. Why is the house next to you worth what they think it's worth? It's because the community believes and is willing to pay that much money for the house that's for sale next to you. It's not because the house is intrinsically worth that much money. The wood, the siding, the glass, the stove, the grass, the picket fence, you add all that up, does that add up to the value of the house? Probably not. There is a value attached to that asset because of our societal belief, our belief, yours and mine, that that house is worth that kind of money. But guess what? It has a lot to do with what neighborhood it is in, what city it is in. Is it in Jackson Hole? Is it in Grand Teton National Park? Is it in the desert of Arizona? I mean, that plays a lot of value. That tells you it's not intrinsic value. You can't add up the sum of its parts anywhere in the world and come up with its value. The value is based on what we believe the value is. That's true. The dollar, gold, silver, real estate, all of the assets that we invest in, including stocks and bonds and Bitcoin. Isn't that insane? There's no intrinsic value in Bitcoin. It's an entry to ledger. I get that. There is no argument anywhere on the planet about that. But the world at large has accepted that this thing has been accepted in a large enough number of people, enough number of communities in the world, that it has value because literally millions of people believe it has value and agree to participate in the marketplace that we call Bitcoin. You know, and I hear a lot of people say, including people in this community, that it's all crap. The whole crypto world and crypto coins and Bitcoin, it's all crap and it's going to go to zero. I mean, that is a possibility, but it is a highly improbable thing that's going to happen. Too many people on the planet, you're talking millions of people, have believed, have taken the belief and are operating as if this thing, and a lot of others, but we'll just stick with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has true value because I'm willing to pay you 100 grand for it. And someone else is willing to pay me 103. And someone else is willing to pay them 106. Times millions and millions and millions of transactions. And then the other thing I would be careful of is the players that are playing in the marketplace known as Bitcoin. Some of the biggest finance institutions in the world are taking stakes. They're buying Bitcoin, billions and billions of dollars worth. The US government, the US federal government is getting involved. I think by the end of this year, you will see the US federal government buying cryptocurrencies and placing them as reserve assets, just like they buy gold, to back the US currency, to back the US economy. With players like that getting in the market, it is my belief that there is no chance that the world known as cryptocurrencies, and particularly Bitcoin, is going to zero. So the other term, the other concept I want to get out to you guys is the idea of the broken up bits, the pieces of a Bitcoin. They're called Satoshis. And so just like a dollar has pennies, and there are 100 pennies to $1, it's very much like that with Bitcoin. You can buy, I had to look it up. There are 100 million Satoshis to every one Bitcoin. That means, if you think about that, you can break down Bitcoin down to a pretty damn granular piece. There's only 100 pennies to $1. there are 100 million Satoshis to a Bitcoin. And I looked it up. One Satoshi is worth $0.001. It's worth 1/10 of a penny. And you can buy any number of Satoshis you want. And you can buy any number of Bitcoins you want. The fallacy is you have to buy a Bitcoin, and that does not happen. That is not true. You can buy any gradation, the smallest component of a cryptocurrency in general, but a Bitcoin. You can buy any number of Satoshis you want. You can put $1 into Bitcoin. You can put $1 million into Bitcoin, but you don't have to buy it in any larger increment than a Satoshi. There's 100 million of them to every Bitcoin. So when you hear Satoshi, think penny. When you hear Bitcoin, think dollar. That's the relationship. It's just much different because they broke the Satoshi into such tiny pieces. 100 million Satoshis for every single dollar. A single Satoshi is worth about 1/10 of a penny right now, or 1/1000th of a dollar. So you can buy Satoshis for almost nothing. You can buy 1,000 Satoshis for almost nothing. So I just want to break the myth that people got to buy a Bitcoin. Let's talk about if you choose to buy a Bitcoin, how do they put your name in that ledger? So when you buy a Bitcoin or a fractional Bitcoin or Satoshi, so what I imagine is instead of one entry for a Bitcoin in that ledger, there's probably 100 million entries for every Bitcoin. And whatever fraction you own, your name's put in the number of Satoshis. I've never looked at the register. I don't really care. But when you purchase a Bitcoin, how does it get in your name, get into the ledger? Okay, so when you purchase a Bitcoin or a Satoshi or a bunch of Satoshis or a full Bitcoin or whatever, you get assigned a username and a password to whatever portion you've purchased. So if you bought a full Bitcoin, you probably get 100 million entries with your username and password to that purchase. If you buy one Satoshi, you probably get one entry, not 100 million. But they don't call it username and password, all right? They call it public key and private key. So I just want to bust that jargon for you. Your public key is your username, and you can give it to other people so they can see. You can even send Bitcoin using your username. You can receive Bitcoin. You can receive payments. You can receive gifts of Bitcoin. You give them your username, and they use that to change their entry to your entry. They gift it to you. They transfer it to you. You can only send or spend Bitcoin with your username and your password. So Bitcoin can come to you when they only know your public key or your username. You can only spend or transfer or gift Bitcoin with both your username and password, with both your public and private key. So I'm going to go jargony on you for a minute. So to do this, you have to have a Bitcoin wallet. And you can do that by any of the exchanges I've talked to you about. Coinbase and Kraken are the two biggest. And that wallet is what has username and password on it, public and private key, and that's what gets entered. It's still a username and password. It's still a public and private key. It's associated with a wallet, and you can open that wallet up and put things in and take things out as the owner of the wallet, as long as you know both your username and password, or you know both your public key and private key. So when you hear public key, think username. When you think private key, think password. I know there are people going absolutely insane listening to me. I'm not trying to talk to the experts. I'm not trying to talk to people who know the technology and know it down to how it's executed. It's not what I'm trying to do today. I'm trying to talk to people who go, this thing is this mythical cloud and I can't get any plain English discussion about what is this world. So that's what gets entered into that worldwide ledger, is your username and password or your public and private key for everything you purchase. And then if you sell it, whoever buys it, your username and password goes away and gets replaced by the person's username and password who purchased it. And that's how the ledger is maintained. And in fact, the record of your ownership doesn't get deleted. It gets set to the back, and the next owner, and when they sell it, their record goes and the new owners go in. So each entry in the ledger can have multiple historic entries, and that way there is total historical accuracy on who owned every Bitcoin from its creation through to today's world. So hope that explains how who owns what is actually recorded, and how you play with that. So the next question we probably should answer is, how's this long list, this ledger, this spreadsheet, this list of who owns what Bitcoin, how is it maintained? How does it maintain integrity? How is it protected? How does someone not just poke their name over your name? How does somebody not just change their username on top of my username, and they take my Bitcoins and steal them from me and change them from my ownership to theirs, right? How is this list modified? Well, it's protected through it's. So this is what's more buzzwords coming at you. This is a decentralized cryptocurrency, meaning there is no central point of this register. That is called a centralized cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is decentralized, which means every Bitcoin node in the world maintains a copy of the ledger. There are, and if you Google it, I spent a couple hours on it the last couple of days. It's really easy to find out how many nodes there are because there are so many different answers. Everybody has their own opinion of it. The answer is this journal list spreadsheet is replicated to between 18,000, 50,000, or 100,000 Bitcoin nodes on the network worldwide. And the way I understand, there's 18 fully functional nodes. There's 50,000, I don't even know, that maintain, in addition to that maintain the entire journal. And there's like another 50,000 that just watch the journal but don't maintain a full spreadsheet copy. So some number of nodes must agree that this proposed transaction is legitimate. How do they do that? I don't know. And I don't want to go into the technology. You don't care, and I really don't either. But nodes must vote and concur on the proposed transaction. So if you're saying, I'd like to buy a Bitcoin, you send the money in. Like I just bought one on Coinbase. That transaction has to be approved, that there's a Bitcoin out there for me to buy, that whoever's selling me theirs, who I have no idea who it is, has a Bitcoin to sell, that the price has been agreed to, and that the transaction looks legitimate. And once enough nodes vote on it to say, yeah, this looks like a legitimate transaction, the change in the journal list is made and then propagated out to all of the nodes in the world. No single person, no single entry, including the United States government, including any of the Bitcoin miners, including any of the Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, BlackRock, none of them control this network. Nobody can tell the network to shut down. No one can tell the network to stop transacting business. No one can blackball you or anybody. And that's sometimes what you hear in the news. You always say, well, Bitcoin is used to hide nefarious acts. And I'm sure it is. So are $100 bills, by the way. Because no one can tell a Bitcoin network not to transact business with you or me or anybody. So that's one of the strengths of decentralized digital currency. No one controls this network, and that can be a little scary to some people. I consider it a strength because a certain number of nodes, and I don't know how many, has to approve every single transaction before it gets entered in the ledger. And then when an entry in the ledger is modified, the historical record is created, and then it is repropagated out to the world. So how do different versions get justified and which one is deemed the right one? I don't have the technology. I'm not going to lie to you. But I'll tell you, no single entity can control this network. All right, so something else we've talked about is the rumor that quantum computing will erase all the protection around Bitcoin and all cryptocurrencies. And whenever quantum computing comes in, people will be able to, at will, go into the blockchain, go into that long list of Bitcoin ownership and change all the entries from your usernames and everyone's usernames to theirs and steal all the Bitcoin or any of the cryptocurrencies. It's an equal argument no matter what we're talking about. That's true. There's a very good possibility that when quantum computing becomes truly viable, Bitcoin and all the blockchains, all the lists for all the cryptocurrencies will be completely wide open and able to be stolen. I believe that to be a fact. You know what else is a fact? When quantum computing becomes a reality, every password you've ever established will be broken instantly. All of the cyber protection placed around our banks, the central banks, government entities, government databases, secret databases, all the investment houses, all the banks, all security will be rendered useless. Wow. So it's no different for Bitcoin. They just keep saying it about Bitcoin, but it's equally true about your bank, investments banks, your 401k account, your pension program. All of it will be wide open and available to be stolen. That tells me that the security that will have to be literally billion times more secure than it is today will be worked on before quantum computing becomes readily available. That's my hope. Can I prove it? Nope. Is it guaranteed? Nope. But it's a well-known fact in the technology and cyber community that quantum computing will erase computer security as we know it across the world comprehensively. So don't let someone tell you that cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin are going to be stolen from you when quantum computing becomes available. Because that sentence is true for absolutely every protected asset in the cyber world, in the computer world, in the internet world. That is true for everyone. Every username, every password, every encryption code will be instantly broken when quantum computing is available. It is not specifically pointed at cryptocurrencies. It's true for crypto. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying it's true for all cybersecurity, all protection of anything on the internet. So clearly a solution has to become available for that. Not just for crypto, but for the entire protected world. So don't let that be the reason you hate on cryptocurrencies. So there's another fallacy I want to start shining some light on, that is that owning stock is safer somehow, and that there seems to be this myth out there that when we buy a share of IBM or Google or Apple or Intel or Nvidia, that we actually own that share of stock, because we do not. We do not. You know, in the old days, really old days, you'd buy a share of stock from a company and they'd mail you the certificate, and that was the proof that you owned a share of stock. That is not the way it's done today. We don't contact the companies. We buy it through brokers. And you buy it through, the big boys. Charles Schwab is the largest, right? Well, guess who owns the stock when you buy the stock through Charles Schwab? Charles Schwab does. And in fact, there's a term for it. In almost every instance, when you buy or sell securities with a broker, your name is not actually on the stock or bond certificate. The name that appears on the certificate is that of your broker or other nominee. And this is referred to as being held in street name. Okay? So you don't own it. You get rights because the broker tells the company that you've purchased a share, so you're listed as a shareholder. But if you'll notice, most of the stuff you get, the perspectives and the notice of shareholders and all that, usually comes from your broker and not from the company itself. And even if it comes from the company itself, it is only because they've been notified that you are a shareholder. I don't think the company has any idea who owns their shares or how many is owned by each. They can obtain that information, but I don't think they particularly care most of the time, unless a hostile takeover is coming. But that we don't do that. So I mean, there's a fallacy that for me too, I'm not saying it's you. When we buy stocks and bonds, we don't own them. We have the rights to them, and our name is in what? Guess what? A journal entry, a list of people who own stocks through this brokerage. Sounds a lot like crypto, doesn't it? So I just want to start beating down the barriers that like crypto is some weird freaking alien thing. Its value is based upon a community's say or agreement as to what the value is. Well, that's exactly the same as a share of stock. Why do you think stock goes up and down so much? People, we panic. Everybody loves Apple, goes up. People panic about Apple, it goes down. There's no intrinsic value in Apple. I guess there is. I mean, there's like book value or whatever, where if you liquidated all the plants and inventory and all that, there's the book value. But there's no intrinsic value in Apple. It's what you think it's worth versus what I think it's worth. And we come to agree to, if you think it's worth $1 and I think it's $2, I end up selling it to you for $1.50. It's worth $1.50. The dollar's the same way. Stocks, bonds, real estate, gold, silver. It's all based on what the community, the large, almost worldwide community, believes these things are valued at. It's the exact same thing for cryptocurrency. If you don't own the username and password and you left someone else to hold it for you, then you don't own it, right? So at some point you have to download your crypto onto a cold wallet, but we'll eventually. We'll talk about that in another video. But that's no different if you don't own your gold. If you own gold or GLD or gold certificates or whatever, but you don't have the gold in your possession in a vault or something, then you don't own the gold either. I just think we like to beat on crypto because it's the new boy in town, but it's been here for 17 years. It's not going anywhere. So I want to go back to ownership in stocks and bonds for a minute. I want to read something to you because I know I'm just breaking chains around brains here. Most Americans have probably never heard of the Uniform Commercial Code, or UCC, which is a comprehensive set of laws governing all commercial transactions in the United States. Even fewer Americans are familiar with Article 8 of the UCC, which provides a modern legal structure for the system of holding securities through intermediaries. That's what you are when you buy stock through your broker, or your 401k does, or your pension plan does. In the mid-1990s, Article 8 was revised so that investment securities can be safely used as collateral by large financial institutions. Essentially, this modification of an obscure set of laws allowed big banks to use their customers' securities in investment accounts as collateral in the derivatives market. They get to use shit that you think you own to back their debt. Eventually, the big banks began using their customers' securities as collateral to make money in developing worldwide derivatives markets. Basically, banks like JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and others pool these assets in a place like the Depository Trust Company, which is a member of the U.S. Federal Reserve System, a limited purpose trust company under New York State banking law, and a registered clearing agency with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The DTC, the Depository Trust Company, retains custody of more than 1.4 million active securities valued at $87 trillion. I'm just going to leave it there. So if you think you own the stock you own, if you think you own the stock in your 401k plan, if you think your company owns the stock in its pension plans, it's all wrong. It's all, we're all listed as owners in a list, in a database, in an accounting sheet, just like if you own Bitcoin. You're not listed as an owner by the company with certificates of ownership, certificates of stock with your name on them. Anyway, I'm just trying to break chains so that you don't think this one thing is so weird compared to everything else. All right, guys, I've done enough damage for the day. Let's wrap this up. So hopefully you have a sense of what is a Bitcoin, how is it maintained, how is ownership recorded, how is it protected, how is the value of a Bitcoin established, and that it's really not a whole lot different than gold, silver, real estate, the US dollar. It's all based on the community's belief in the value. And I don't know why we have such a belief in a piece of paper with a $1 printed on it than we do in a Bitcoin registry. It's kind of interesting. I think it's just recency bias, as it's called. We're so used to this dollar that it has value, and this one, for 100 years, or really, 1913. And by the way, this dollar bill today is worth about 2.5 cents compared to when it was created in 1913. So it's funny that we think of it as a safe asset. It's just because we're so used to it, I think. But it's lost 97.5% of its value since 1913. That's when our current dollar was created. And we've really been able to disable the dollar's value since about 1971. So it's just, I find it interesting that we're so chained around the brain that, the dollar's where it's at. I totally trust it when it's based on what we think of its value as a community. And, how many dollars are we willing to pay for an asset like an Apple or a car? But this new one is weird and untrustworthy. I just think it's because we're not used to it. Guys, I hope this helped. I hope it starts breaking chains. I hope it starts clearing the fog of jargon. If you can learn it and understand that at the Bitcoin level, it really is the granddaddy. It's the foundation of all other crypto. Most of them work the same way. People who invest in meme coins will be laughing at me. People who invest at secondary DAXs and all this crap that I don't want to try to blur your brain with, are laughing at me right now. But I believe my English explanation of how this world works in the crypto world is pretty damn accurate. All right, guys. Hope you have a good Sunday. Please bash me in the head, man. Ask me questions, make statements. I mean, where do you want to go from here? There's so many ways we can go in the crypto world. Hope it helps. Talk to you later. Bye, everybody.